Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Imago Relationships Think Tank. And today is, I want to say April 8th, right? And 2015. And this is Dr. Tammy Nelson. I am your moderator for today. And we have a great guest today. I think you're really going to enjoy our talk for today. She is Alexandra Katehakis, and she's really interesting, and I just really like her work and like her as a person. She's the founder and clinical director of the Center for Healthy Sex in Los Angeles, and she's a senior fellow at the Meadows. She's a certified sex addiction therapist, supervisor, and a certified sex therapist. She specializes in the treatment of sex addiction and sexual marital therapy. And Alexandra Katehakis has incorporated interpersonal neurobiology into her psychobiological approach to sex addiction treatment. So we're going to hear more about that and how she works with people in her center and how she works with couples and individuals. And she's authored a couple books. She's the co-author of Mirror of Intimacy, Daily Reflections on Emotional and Erotic Intelligence. And she's a contributing author to the Clark Vincent Award-winning Making Advances, a comprehensive guide for treating female sex and love addicts. And she's the author of Erotic Intelligence, Igniting Hot, Healthy Sex After Recovery from Sex Addiction. So she's really the pioneer in how to have healthy sex after sex addiction and also working with female sex addicts. And she's also working on an upcoming book, Sex Addiction as Affect Dysregulation, a Holistic Healing Model. So Alexandra Katehakis is a regular contributor to Huffington Post and Psychology Today, and she's worked as a clinical educator to multiple mental health and addiction treatment centers in the U.S. and Europe. And in 2012, the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health gave her the Cons Award for her significant contribution to the field of sex addiction treatment. And she has really spoken in many different places. I've had the privilege of being on stage with her in Irvine, California. We spoke together at a couples conference. She's very articulate, very smart, and I think she's going to talk today about the mirror of intimacy on arousal and this idea of sexual arousal and excitement, joy, and the things that come with the idea of arousal versus loneliness, pain, and fear, and how we can talk about healthy, if you want to call it that, sexuality and pleasurable sex and versus lust and obsession. And we're going to ask some questions about this really controversial idea of sex addiction and how it might show up in our practice as Imago therapists when we sit with couples in our office. And so thank you so much, Alex, for being here today. I'm just so excited to have you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for that introduction. So, did you say that you wanted to start with a specific topic, or did you have a question about that topic?
Well, first I just want to welcome you and thank you for being here, and thank you for, being sort of a pioneer in this field and just stepping into this work around sexuality after addiction. And I want to ask you, we might as well jump into the real mess of it and ask you about sex addiction, because sex addiction is sort of a controversial topic. They didn't put it in the DSM. Mm-hmm. I just interviewed Doug Harvey about, out of control sexual behavior, and he definitely does not use the word sex addiction. So there's really a couple schools of thought. So can you tell us a little bit about how you feel about that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I really respect and love Doug's work, and I don't think he and I are that far afield in the way we think about this. But in my research for this current book, the Sex Addiction as Affect Dysregulation, which the Norton series for Interpersonal Neurobiology is putting out, I've had to do a lot of research and thinking about this situation and problem, and it keeps evolving and changing as I read. And I think, for starters, the word addiction simply means a strong predilection for something. So when we run around saying we're addicted to our iPhones or chocolate or Pilates, we're not using that word inappropriately. There are some very real processes that occur in the brain, starting in the brainstem. And Jaak Panksepp's work is the sort of most prolific work about this. He's worked with rats specifically for decades, and there are 7 motivational systems in all mammals that originate in the brainstem, what he calls primary process, and the seeking system is the granddaddy of that circuit. So we are constantly seeking salience, safety, food, water, sex, anything in our environment, because we're predators and we're prey also. So an example of that is you walk into, let's say, a large luncheon or a conference, and your threat detection system is not in high arousal, but it's up, and you're scanning quickly, and then you see a colleague that you know, and you sort of run to that person, and you might not even know them well, but you're like, "Hi, how are you? I'm so glad you're here. It's nice to see a friendly face," because you're seeking safety in that moment, and we then downregulate our system and say, "Oh, this is an okay place to be." And depending on your social anxiety will depend on how regulated that person can actually make you. So that's an example of seeking. So when you are someone who is prone towards compulsivity, let me just say that is a bottom-up process. That's low in the brainstem. Up above in the prefrontal areas, if you have had damage to the prefrontal cortex because of childhood abuse or neglect, then you're going to have problems with impulse control. So now you've got this tenacious or robust seeking system, and you don't have anything on top down-regulating it. So what the person's going to do is they're going to head for the things that make them feel better, and that can be drugs, alcohol, sex, food, compulsive spending, gambling, you name it. I mean, we live in kind of a, quote, addictive culture. What happens then is the seeking system is moving towards the reward. So it's actually the seeking of the reward that activates the mesolimbic or subcortical dopamine system. And it's in that seeking process that we get what we call addiction. Because the actual acquisition of the reward is when the party's over, even if it's drugs or alcohol. It's the looking, the seeking, especially with process addictions, I say that in quote, food, drugs, or food, sex, etc., that activates those centers of the brain. And that area is called the ventral tegmental area, and that's where the dopamine gets released into the brain. If you've got someone who's chronically depressed or was neglected over time as a child, then you're going to get what we call low dopamine tone. So they're always going to be looking for something to make them feel better. It's sort of like cutting. That's why people cut that are borderline, because they are so dead and dissociative that they want to feel something. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, the way the addictive process in the brain works. And I think things like internet pornography for people that are prone towards addiction, which is a small percentage, can be very addictive and detrimental, certainly to relationships over time. So I'm going to come up for air there.
That's great. I just want to ask you to move a little bit away from your mic because there's a little bit of reverb.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, much better. And you are really explaining so well the brain piece around addiction and the potential to be prone towards that obsessive-compulsive sort of longing and that the repetitive behavior that goes with the seeking behavior. And also, you sort of touched on sort of that withdrawal that would lead you into that loop and being stuck there. Am I getting that?
Yes. And, when we're talking about several different kinds of abuse, so Alan Shore's work, and Alan has been my mentor for almost 9 years now, and he's the editor on my book, his work is really about what happens in infancy, in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, when the autonomic nervous system is setting up, and when that mother is starting to regulate that infant and bringing up the functions and structures of the right hemisphere, which is completely dependent on interaction. It's experience dependent in order to mature. Lou Cozolino talks about that the brain is a social organ, so it's required in order for it to come up optimally. If you've got a mother who's depressed or anxious or pathological in some ways, memories are being laid down in the right amygdala from the get-go. So these are not cognitive memories. They're not even neuronal networks yet. It's just in the right amygdala that, these things are being set up. And then as the infant's brain matures and the higher cortical areas start to come online, namely the right orbital frontal cortex, which Shore calls the apex of the limbic system and the regulatory center, if that center has thin axons going down to the right amygdala, you're going to have what we call borderline constructs, because that part of the brain cannot downregulate the fear center. So that's deep, early relational trauma. That's different than a child that grows up in a household where there's alcoholism or abuse or emotional neglect. That's now a second layer of trauma that's going to impact the development of the prefrontal cortex and the executive systems. There's also data from Martin Teicher and DeBellis where they talk about childhood abuse creating problems in the corpus callosum. So the right and left hemisphere have difficulty communicating with each other. Whereas in the early relational trauma, the right and the body become dissociated or disconnected. So you can see this gets super complicated, and we live in a consumer culture and a capitalistic culture, and everything is geared towards buying things, and the messages are, if we buy something, or if we look a certain way, or if we have sex a certain way, then we're going to be happy. So it's not just our individual psychology or neurobiology, it's wrapped in this crazy culture that we live in. So people that are maybe sensitive to or prone towards getting into trouble, let's use internet porn for example, may end up with a real problem, because everybody looks at internet porn today, and I think internet porn has done wonders for how we think about sex and sexuality. It's helped people become freer sexually, but there is a small percentage that becomes that gets into a lot of problem and a lot of pain because of it.
Yeah, I like how you're saying that there's the people with the potential that it could be very harmful for, and that could be very problematic.
The other problem is, and Cordelia Anderson is really, on the cutting edge of this, because she works with children and youth and internet pornography, is that when you've got an 8-year-old's brain that's unmyelinated, that's still not developing, looking at hardcore images, that's sort of like looking at someone who's been beheaded or mutilated for a brain that age. It doesn't register. It's horrific. And those imprints are imprinted in the brain and in the body, creating an arousal template. So if that child looks at a lot of that over time, she's going to be moaning and groaning and moving her body and seeking situations that replicate that. And in a way, she's never really gotten to make a choice about her sexuality. It's been imposed upon her. So these are sort of bigger, philosophical issues also.
So tell us how you move someone who might be in those kind of pathological places to a healthier place, either individually or in a couple.
Well, when somebody comes in and they really ring the bell for sex addiction, and when I say ring the bell, we have some good instruments available to us online. One of them is called the Sex Addiction Screening Test. It's been normed and measured on sex addicts, and people that don't believe in sex addiction really want to rip it apart and take it to task. But it's a self-report measure. So the person is endorsing that they indeed have this problem. Nobody's scoring it. Nobody is, blaming the person or shaming them. And it helps people see that, wow, I'm saying that I have a problem with this. So my philosophy at Center for Healthy Sex is that if somebody comes in and they say, I have a problem with drinking, sex, whatever, then the person has a problem. That's different than me imposing some normative standard on someone and saying, well, you have a problem with this. Because, just for the record, we treat plenty of people that are into kink and have poly relationships, and they come in. We had one guy call last year saying, I sniff women's panties, and I don't want to stop doing it. I just want to stop having shame about it. So we said, sure, come on in. So nobody was screaming, oh, you're a sex addict. We hear what the patient has to say, and we meet them where they're at. But if someone says, I think I'm sexually compulsive or I think I have a sex addiction, then we definitely do a complete assessment with them and have them take that sex addiction screening test, which you can find on my website, which is centerforhealthysex.com. So in the initial assessment, we essentially do a psychosocial assessment, but there's a heavy emphasis and investigation on sexual history. So all the sexual firsts, when you first found out about sex, first masturbation, first exposure to pornography, sex, sexual abuse, tampering of any kind, etc. And then we start looking for patterns of, an increase in behavior. Because if somebody is reporting a loss of control, that they've made multiple efforts to stop and they can't, that they've lost time, let's say with their family, or people that are sex addicts spend an inordinate amount of time preparing for the experience and then covering it up on the back end. They're preoccupied with, looking, seeking escorts, images, etc. So that then leads to an inability to fulfill obligations, like they're not doing well on the job, or they're stealing time from their employer, or they don't make it to, a kid's rehearsal, or they're late. I mean, it just goes on and on. And then if they continue despite negative consequences, let's say they've been arrested for lewd conduct, or they've been caught and covered it up with their partner, but they keep doing it anyway because they can't stop. And then, of course, there's, an escalation as well, that people will keep doing things and crossing lines that violate their own value systems. So I don't have a morality about what people do necessarily unless they're tampering with children or animals. That's my own personal compass. But people, men, for example, will start to have sex with transsexuals and or men, and that's against their value system, but they've done it anyway because it's kind of a higher high. And that can then lead to multiple losses, like from relationships to jobs to things as simple as hobbies or valued parts of a person's life. And then when they try to stop the behavior, there is considerable distress. So anxiety, restlessness, irritability, what we call withdrawal symptoms, which is also controversial with behavioral addictions. But when somebody stops managing their mood by way of dopamine seeking, then what you're going to see are the underlying axis 1 issues that drove them to do it to begin with. And that then has us able to start to look deeper into why would a person start to do something like this and get themselves so wrapped up in patterns that they're destroying their lives. Where did that come from? So I use a cognitive behavioral treatment model initially to help people stop the behavior so we can start to get a read on what's actually going on. Because it's really like someone who's drinking and saying, I'm an alcoholic and I want to stop, and they keep drinking. We can't really find out why they're drinking. Some people have bipolar disorder. Some people are very depressed. Some are socially anxious. There are many reasons, or they're covering up a rape or some kind of acute trauma. But if they keep drinking, we're never going to find out what's going on. So that's really sort of the first step in helping people, start to recover their lives. So do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a path towards recovery. So when you were talking about working with them in your center, is it an inpatient program? Do you keep them for outpatient and continue to work with them individually towards a healthier sex model, or do you work with them as partnerships?
If somebody lives locally, we have individual therapy, we have group therapy. I'm very happy and proud to say that I have a certified Imago therapist on my staff now, which is really helpful because when the partner discovers the sex addiction, the addict is in deep shame, the partner is incredibly traumatized and often just, very labile, enraged, terrified, you name it. And the Imago, the dialogue helps people to settle down, and it really helps the partner feel like the addict has some empathy, because the addict wants to run. They don't run, but they devolve into shame very quickly because it's such a shameful problem. So we offer all of this kind of outpatient services. For people around the country and really outside of the country as well, we offer a 2-week intensive outpatient program for males, females, and a 1-week program for partners of sex addicts, and they're all gender specific. But that 2-week program packs a lot of treatment into it. For some people, they can't afford a 45-day hospital stay, so the first week is really about deconstructing denial and family of origin and grief and loss, and really getting people into their feelings because they don't have the behaviors anymore to make themselves feel better. And they live in sober living, so the sober living transports them to and from our office and to and from 12-step meetings. So it's as, tightly contained as it can be for an outpatient program. And then the second week, we spend a lot of time on relapse prevention so that when they come back to the referring therapist, they have an aftercare plan, and we interface throughout the program with the referring therapist as well. So it's sort of like a mini hospital stay, and it's incredibly rigorous. I mean, they're occupied the entire time they're with us and fairly well exhausted by the time they leave, but super grateful, too, because people report feeling so much better. And we also psych test if needed. So we pretty much do everything we can, as I said, in this outpatient setting.
And how much is the family or the spouse involved, usually?
Well, if they are local, a lot. One of the things, of course, any partner wants is to know what was actually going on, because they've been living with secrets and lies for so long, and they no longer trust their own intuition and reality, because addicts will often tell their partners, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, or you're imagining this, or they start to blow their shame through their partner, making the partner feel crazy or like she's, running a household or a family on her own, or he, depending on the gender. And so we try to get the partner in as soon as possible so that we can help stabilize her trauma, because this is a gross betrayal to the attachment system. And then we work both parties towards what we call a full formal disclosure. So we take the addict through a rigorous process of doing a sexual timeline history, and then distilling it down to, the facts, sort of like a police report of who he had sex with, how often, when, how much money he spent. So it may sound something like, from 2009 to 2010, I started hiring sex workers. I would have sex with escorts 1 time a month. I would go for sexual massage 1 time a month. I had unprotected oral sex or protected intercourse. So it's not what we call the gory details, but just the facts. And oftentimes, there were things like a birthday or Christmas where somebody disappeared and they lied about their car breaking down, and finally the partner hears that, he actually went to a strip club, and that's where he was, and I knew something wasn't right. So it helps to write the partner's reality. And I don't think you can rebuild a relationship when there are secrets and lies. I think for the addict's recovery and for the health of the system, the addict has to come completely clean with what he's done or she's done. And oftentimes the addicts will argue that their partner can't handle the truth. And usually it's that the addict can't handle telling the truth. I find that people that stay with partners that, are sick, really, are really strong people, and they want to keep their families together, and they typically, love the person, but they've just been duped for so long that they're so angry and they're so injured themselves. So it's quite a brutal process, I have to say. Doing disclosures with people is very painful, and it takes marriages to the brink, really. And I would say about 80% of the people survive. If they really do the work, and if they both get into therapy, and they're really willing to uncover, just the horrendous tragedy of what they've been living through, the amount of growth and change that comes from forgiveness and healing is quite remarkable. And so my model, has evolved over the years, because when I first learned Patrick Carnes' model, it was just a model of an addiction model that just got people to stop the behavior. But that's when I came to writing Erotic Intelligence, because I thought, this isn't right. People stop acting out sexually, but then they don't know how to have sex again. So real sexual recovery, I think, means moving sex and sexuality to a place of, being delicious and celebratory, and an act of real, caring for one another, not as a weapon against somebody else, which is often how people use sex when they're using it destructively. So we do work a lot with sex therapy issues, on the back end as well. So it's a long process. I mean, the sort of studies we have in the sex addiction world show that it takes 3 to 5 years to repair these relationships. And it's a lot of work and a lot of resources. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you tell us more about your book?
Well, the current book I'm writing is the current book or the Mirror of Intimacy book?
Yeah, all of them.
Okay. Well, Erotic Intelligence is a self-help book, and it's really for a person who is in recovery from sex addiction. So they've already said they have a problem, they are in treatment, they've done disclosure with their partner. So it's for both people to read and start to ask themselves vital questions about, how to have sex again. It really is a self-help book. It's pretty simple and clear. I get a lot of good feedback from patients about the book. So it's not, a book, if you're a sex therapist or certainly an Imago therapist, that is going to be completely mind-boggling for you, but it is for patients that are in recovery from this problem. Making Advances is a book for therapists, and 10 women from around the country who've been treating female sex addiction for years came together, and we put our heads together collectively, and we wrote this book for therapists because treating females is different than treating males. Treating females requires a much more relational stance, whereas males come in and they just want to know what to do and how to fix the problem. So they're much more amenable to doing task work and homework and reading and going to meetings. They bond with other men pretty quickly, whereas females need time to really process the loss of an affair partner. They don't let go the way that men will. Men will just cut it off. So it's a different, it's just a slightly, by degrees, different way of working. And that book is filled with information on how to set up groups for women, etc. And Mirror of Intimacy, which is really, was a passion project for sure, is a book of daily meditations on sex and sexuality. And that book can be found on Amazon.com. It's called Mirror of Intimacy. And we also send the meditations out every day into your email box if you want to sign up for them. They're free. So if you go to centerforhealthysex.com, you'll see a button where you can sign up for the daily meditations. And there's a sidebar on those meditations every day that announce webinars that I do once a month. So on Monday, I think the entry on Monday was sexual orientation. So that's what I talked about for an hour. And but sometimes it's on arousal or, integrity or spirituality and sex, any number of topics. We have 365 of them. But that book really came about because my project manager at CST-S, who's named Tom Bliss, is a recovering sex and love addict himself and also enormously talented project manager. And we were talking one day about how we didn't think there was a really terrific book on sex and sexuality for daily meditations that really incorporated, philosophy and religion and spirituality and neurobiology and attachment and nonviolent communication. And we drew from a multitude of wisdom traditions and put our heads together and wrote this book. And it's just been really popular. People love it, and people write to us from all over the world. So I would encourage everyone to, sign up for them. If you don't like them, you can always unsubscribe. But we did end up publishing the book as a hardcover because we got such a great response from it. And it's a beautiful hardback book, and it's got a lot of special features to it. So it makes a nice wedding gift or Valentine's gift or special birthday gift or something like that, too. So you can purchase it in paperback or in hardcover. So that's Mirror of Intimacy, and currently I'm just starting Chapter 9 when I get off the phone here. On a book that, as I said earlier, is for the Norton series on Interpersonal Neurobiology, which Dan Siegel was the original editor on. Alan Shore is the editor of now, and I believe Lou Cozolino is going to take the baton from Alan in the next year. But this is sort of the deeper level of my work with sex addiction, and this is for therapists. It's a highly researched book. And it's really looking at, once we stop the behaviors with a cognitive behavioral model and we get the couple stabilized, what happens, especially with those people who have this early relational infantile trauma that has them having attachment difficulties, which we now recognize as regulatory problems in the autonomic and central nervous system, and how do we work with these people? And, when you really understand the neurobiology of the brain and the body, what Alan Shore has put forth is that you can work generically by using yourself interpersonally and in the intersubjective field, meaning you pay attention to your own somatic cues, your intuition, your dreams, everything that's happening and being co-constructed between the two of you in the therapeutic setting. And that builds profound and deep intimacy, and it changes not only the patient, but it changes the therapist, because we're really changing the functions and structures of our own brains. We're also, heartily up against our own limitations when it comes to being relational. And so, this is the work, this has been the paradigm shift in psychotherapy also, that we're not just analyzing someone else or just working in these higher cognitive areas, that we have to let those areas, our own high cognitive areas, go offline and travel deeper down our own right cortical column into our bodies and let ourselves feel with our patients and see what emerges out of that. And that's where the deeper healing comes from the people that are most traumatized. There are some excellent certification programs for working thematically, such as, Pat Ogden's model and Peter Levine's model. There are many new certifications popping up on how to work affectively. But what Shore puts forward and what I'm writing about in my book is really about sharpening our clinical skills and taking risks when it comes to getting into the abyss with our patients, into their own primordial issues, and regulating them and attuning to them as we go along, or it would be attuning and regulating. So that's the nature of the book. So it really started out with a history of sex addiction in Chapter 1, look at the neuroscience behind early attachment in 2, the addiction process in 3. I'm looking at cultural issues in Chapter 4. Then there's treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy, affect regulation therapy, healthy sex, and then my last chapter will be on what's happening socio-culturally or politically when it comes to the lack of sex education in our country and just how we treat sexuality. So that's sort of the book in a nutshell.
So, Alex, what do you recommend if people have someone in their office that they suspect is, going through this issue? What do you recommend for someone who's working with someone this afternoon?
Well, if you're working with a couple, I think it's very challenging to ask pointed questions because you're likely not going to get the truth. Because addicts minimize. It doesn't matter whether they're taking pills or drinking or using sex. So if a couple comes in and there's low desire on the side of one person or the other, and I have to say it's a little biased towards males, and you're looking at the partner. I had a case like this, and she's beautiful, and she's sexy, and she's trying everything she can, but he's just not that into her. So I will ask, how much pornography are you looking at, and how often? Because everybody looks at porn today. So I think that if someone's looking at porn, a couple times a week, 2, 3, maybe 4 times a week, and, the guy's, masturbating, and he's kind of in and out after, 15 minutes, and he can do without it, it's just sort of a normal bodily function, then it's fine. But if he is disappearing, it's like every single day, it's hours, he's losing time, he's also not where he's supposed to be, and she's suspicious that something's not right, then you've got to trust your gut and your intuition about that. And so it's not about being on a witch hunt, but it is about paying attention to those cues, those somatic cues, when you feel like somebody's not telling the truth here. So it depends on, your model, but I would ask both of them if I could see them individually for one session. And then I would ask very pointed questions of the person that I thought was possibly, lying or having an affair or having a problem. I would just come right out and ask them, have you ever had sex outside of the marriage? Have you ever hired sex workers? Something's not lining up here. Your wife is beautiful and sexy and she wants you, and it seems like you're doing these end runs to avoid her. What's really going on here? So I would let them know that I know that something is amiss. And it may be that he says, well, you know what, I really want out of the marriage, I just haven't told her. Great. But the point is that you have to get to the bottom of what you're feeling is true and not let that, not get into collusion with the addiction. Because I've had many, many people come in over the years who are in therapy for years, and the partner, the female partner, will say, every therapist has sided with him and left me feeling crazy, and you're the first person who's confronted him. And in so doing, what I found in this particular case I'm thinking about is the guy admitted to a few things. And he begrudgingly started to see a therapist at CST-S, and then she sort of caught him red-handed on his phone. Everybody gets caught on their phones today, and when he was confronted with it, he finally had to come clean. So that's my answer, is that you have to ask, and you've got to pay attention to the cues that are coming towards you. Especially if you're not getting anywhere and you know that you're skilled and you know that typically people move in certain ways, but if you're not getting anywhere consistently, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. So one of the things that I ask everyone on the think tank, aside from, what's something to look for this afternoon in your couples and something you could apply, what is one small intervention that people can apply, even if they're not a sex addiction therapist, even if they're not comfortable you doing the work? Is there something that you might recommend for them to do, some kind of small intervention, even if it's something little, in their work day?
Well, you mean if they suspected that there was infidelity?
Infidelity or sex addiction or some kind of obsessive, out-of-control behavior.
Right. Well, I think asking the question about pornography usage is very provocative because if it's a problem, the partner will let you know. They'll say things like, well, yeah, he comes to sleep, hours after me every night, or he'll get up in the middle of the night and he goes and gets on the computer and it makes me really uncomfortable. Or, yeah, I've walked into the room before and you switch screens really quickly. Or she'll say, yeah, I noticed you spend a lot of time in the bathroom with your phone, and I've been wanting to ask you what you're doing in there, or when I ask you, you get really angry at me. So, yeah, how much porn do you look at? The partner, if you ask that question about the frequency and duration of internet pornography and masturbation, if there's a problem, if the partner's feeling like she is partners say they feel like they're being cheated on. They feel like there's another woman when the pornography is excessive and secretive. They will chime in immediately, and then you know that there's something going on in this system where somebody's minimizing something or they're taking their needs elsewhere, meaning that it's just easier to masturbate to internet porn than have to deal with the difficulty in the relationship. So I would say that's a powerful intervention just in and of itself. I have gone so far as to ask people just flat outright if they've had sex outside the marriage in front of their partner to see what kind of reaction I get, because I'm looking for deceit. But again, you have to have a good context for that. You can't just ask that out of the blue.
Yeah. Good. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that you tell people before we open it up for questions? We may or may not get people who want to ask you something, but I want to make sure that you get in everything that you want to say.
Well, I just think that for people to know that the Center for Healthy Sex is a very big resource. Our intake counselors are on the phone. They can help you with resources in your area, whether it's a therapist that works with these issues or that, groups, meetings, workshops, etc. And our website is centerforhealthysex.com. They can also talk to you about our Intensive Outpatient Program, and therapists around the country find this an invaluable resource because if they're grappling with somebody and the person keeps slipping, sliding, lying, and when they return, the therapists are relieved because they can actually start to do their work with the person, and they can start to work with the couple because the person who's the problem is beginning to get, has gotten really honest with themselves. So that is a valuable resource to all of you, too. So use my website, centerforhealthysex.com, and our phone number is 310-843-9902.
Yeah, and I just want to say you are so prolific. I mean, the fact that you send out these meditations all the time, and they are not short. I mean, they're thoughtful and long and well prepared. I don't know how you have time to do those.
They're 300 words. We were tasked 300 words, and it's really challenging to create something sophisticated in 300 words. But it became like a writing exercise because we wrote them in 18 months, and sometimes we were just writing them every day and slapping them up there before we even edited them. So they're in a much more refined state now. They're in the condition that you'll find them in the book now. So this is the final version that people are getting today.
Very impressive. Very impressive. Okay, so Sarah, if you're listening, we can open it up for questions and comments. She'll give people the announcements. They can take themselves off mute by hitting *6.
Tammy?
Yes.
Hi, this is Damien in Houston. Thanks for moderating.
Yes.
I have a comment and two quick questions. Alexandra, I want to say, as someone who was an addiction therapist a long time ago and has become a couple therapist for the past 15-plus years, who trained with Pat Corns long before CSAT-S, I am blown away by your work. I just love it. So I just want to say it's such a refreshing. So my first question is, how much of your thinking do you think is present among CSATs today in general?
Well, I think that's a big challenge right now. I think there's a movement within ITAP, the organization that certifies the certified sex addiction therapist, Tammy, to move into a more sexually positive way of looking at things. I am on the faculty for that training now. I teach the third module, and I'm really on a soapbox about this issue because the sex therapist, because I'm an ASEC certified supervisor as well, really want to construct sex addiction therapists as sex negative, and it's just not true. I think the more sophisticated we become in the world of psychotherapy and recognizing sex as a vital part of our humanity, the more that paradigm has to die, just as all the repression about sexuality has to die. So we're trying now to become much more integrated as an organization. And the challenge is that sex addiction therapists are actually treating sex. And sex therapy is on a continuum from, aberrant, destructive, problematic sex to beautiful tantric practices. And I think sex addiction therapists are going to have to become much more educated and fluid in the field of sexuality.
I couldn't agree with you more. I support you totally. I'm feeling a lot of grief from all the many marriages and families and committed love relationships that I know personally from my own practice have been destroyed or seriously injured by CSAT-S, who typically split the couple into the coses and the sex addicts and let the marriage die and pathologize both of them. It really, as you can tell, I'm very upset about that.
Well, it's horrible, and my stance is that I will go to the mat for a couple. My agenda is always to keep couples together, especially when there are children involved. It's grueling work, but I think that model that you're talking about is a very old one, and again, it's one that has to go, because it does create more damage than good.
I just wanted to put something in meditation. They are wonderful. I believe so much that I never delete your profound words, and I'm looking forward to your book.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And one of the things about Mirror of Intimacy that's been so beautiful and heartening is the response we've gotten from our readers. When we published the book, all of our endorsements come from readers. One of our readers gave us the title for the book because we sort of put it out there to the community to hear what people would come back with. And Ellen Bader and Pete Pearson wrote our introduction, but other than that, there are no experts involved in the book. The expertise has come from the community. So I love when people, as authors don't get feedback from their books until the books have been out for a long time. So it's always wonderful to hear that people find it useful and that people tell me they copy pages for their patients or they use them in their groups, and it's just really lovely to hear it taking a life of its own.
It's very Imago friendly.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Alex, can you tell people one more time how they can reach you, how they can find you, and how to share your book?
The website is centerforhealthysex.com. All three of my books, Mirror of Intimacy, Making Advances, which was edited by Marnie Faree, and Erotic Intelligence can be found on Amazon.com. And if you have a personal question for me, you can write to me, Alex at centerforhealthysex.com.
Perfect. And I just want to say thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure. I always love hearing you talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tammy. And I look forward to seeing you somewhere in person soon.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And thank you again, and we'll have you on definitely again to talk more about this topic and all the other things that you're doing. And I encourage people to please get in touch with Alexandra if you have more questions or questions about cases or about her Center for Healthy Sexuality. And definitely look up her books. Definitely take time to get to know her work. Alexandra Katehakis and the Center for Healthy Sexuality. And thanks again, everyone, for being here today on the Think Tank. And everybody have a great week.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy. Bye-bye.